So with some Apple Intelligence features still in the oven, we still waiting on that even 1 year later. Typical iOS glitches and bugs, and now we seeing rumors of iOS 26. Even though we on iOS 18, getting into iOS 19, what's exactly happening to iOS and the iPhone? Let me explain. June 9th is Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, aka WWDC. This is where we're gonna see brand new Apple software ranging between iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, and of course we have visionOS, which is rumored to be iOS 26. This is gonna bring a radical redesign to iOS. This is gonna be very similar to updating from iOS 6 to iOS 7. So back then it was going away of the skeuomorphism and into a more flatter and more simplistic design. But this year for iOS 19 or iOS 26, we're gonna talk about that name in a little bit. This is gonna bring a more translucent design, a more glassy look to iOS, very similar to visionOS. This is gonna just bring a whole nother eye candy to your iPhone. So I liked how we had widgets on the home screen, dark mode on the icons, dark mode in general. All that stuff is nice, but nothing beats an actual radical redesign, something that feels brand new, and I'm all for it. And even throughout the Apple apps, you see this design get teased around. You know, of course, we're gonna see some other new features other than just the fresh coat of paint. And features aside, I mean, let's talk about that rebrand. Why is it called iOS 26? If you think about it, the iOS updates are starting to get as old as the year. So for crying out loud, we almost at iOS 20. So it kind of makes sense for Apple to rebrand it to the year, which is going to be 26. So it makes sense for Apple to rebrand it to the year. It's going to make things a little bit more easier to understand because now, whatever the year is, that's the iOS update that we're on. And this is going to make things easier to brand because all you're doing, you're just taking a year. And I think Apple chose a perfect time to rebrand it considering that this is going to get a radical redesign. So it's like, okay, this is iOS 26 now. So we leaps ahead. And then they also just took the year. And the reason why it's not iOS 25 or 2025 is because, well, by the time iOS 26 releases, it's going to be the fourth quarter of 2025. Most people are going to wait until 2026 to mostly use iOS 26. So it makes sense. And car manufacturers do this all the time. They make cars this year for 2026 that's going to be released this year. So it's very similar what Apple is doing here. Not only that, this is going to comply for macOS, watchOS, tvOS, visionOS, iPadOS. So all the operating systems across the board will have 26 just to make things easier. So you'll know exactly if you're on the old update or not. It's going to be complicated now, but throughout the years, it's probably going to get easier to understand. So this rebrand and this redesign of all the software is going to be showcased at Apple's keynote at WWDC on June 9th. And I'm very curious to see how Apple's going to handle iPadOS and even macOS, or just everything in general. So iOS aside, what about the iPhone? This is the iPhone 16. I've done a 6 months later review on it. So if you guys are interested, I'll throw a link in the description. But I think we may see a very similar rebrand to the iPhone because now we on iPhone, well, 17 is going to release this year. But next year we're going to see the iPhone 18 and then the iPhone 19, and it's going to be a mess. So it's a possibility that Apple could call this the iPhone 26 or the iPhone 27, maybe for next year. We don't know. Or maybe just rebrand it to the chipset. Because if you think about it, the iPad lineup is, they don't have iPad 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They don't have that. Or even if you look at the iPad Pro, there's no such thing as an iPad Pro 2. So I think we could have a very similar thing to the iPhones, where they just drop the number or they just might just take the year. So it's a nice tease for what's there to come because they're going to do something with the naming of the iPhone. So it has to be a threshold where the numbers system is going to have to be rebranded. Something has to change. So the iPhone 17 series is going to be very interesting because we are going to get a thin model very similar to the Galaxy S25 Edge, which I have here. So I am going to work on another video on this, so make sure you be on the lookout for it. I appreciate how light this is, premium material. So I'm all for a thin iPhone And I don't know. It's going to either be between the 17 thin model, the Air, or whatever Apple's going to call it, or maybe the Pro Max that we always have. Because the battery life on that is going to be way better compared to the thin model. But choices. I love having choices. You want a thin model, you have it. You want the best battery life, you have that. They might even actually save this rebrand for the iPhone till next year or the year before that, just due to the 20th anniversary of the iPhone, which is crazy to say. So they may change the entire name and structure. Then, just like what they did with the iPhone 10, where they skipped the iPhone 9 and it just went straight to the 10. So something like that is going to happen again for the 20th anniversary. And that leads me, people always say that, oh, companies don't like using the number 9. Apple did use 9 for watchOS 9, the Series 9, iOS 9, basically. So we used 9 before, but I can see why some people are saying that, because we never had a Windows 9 or even Mortal Kombat. We never had a Mortal Kombat 9. It was Mortal Kombat 2011. So I understand where people are coming from with that. I think Apple is just rebranding it just due to the fact how this is a redesign to iOS in general. I really hope that this is a stable release, because lately these days iOS has been a little buggy. You have some occasional bugs every now and then, and Siri, it's very frustrating sometimes. I tell Siri to turn off the lights and to start playing a song called Lights. We need to work on the software. We need stability. We need another iOS 12. Because remember when iOS 12 came out, it was to fix the mess ups of iOS 11, which was one of the glitchiest iOS's. So Apple came out, gave us iOS 12, focusing on stability. We need that again. I would rather have a stability update this year than a redesign. Save the redesign for next year, right, for 2026. Even though it's not going to be in line for 2027 for the redesign of the iPhone, I think you can't go wrong with a stability update. I mean, come on. I'm very curious to see how Apple is going to market this. Are they going to just call it iOS 26 or iOS 2026? And even how they're going to address the whole Apple Intelligence debacle. It got to be something. Or will they be even any new Apple Intelligence features? I mean, I don't know how this keynote is going to be. Although I wish I attend WWDC, but maybe next year I could probably, dream another year. But other than that, I think that is pretty much where I'm going to wrap up the video. By the way, all of this is according to Bloomberg, Mark Gurman. Once Mark Gurman comes out and say X, Y, and Z, more than likely it's going to be true. But yeah, let me know down in the comments down below. Do you like the naming structure? Are you ready for a redesign to iOS? Do you like change? Let me know in the comments down below. And other than that, I hope you all have a simple day. Peace.